And of course, the lady, the special lady from Sunway University, Professor Dr. Susila, who has become a friend to me and who has become a good partner for me. How are you, Prof. Susila? How are you?
Good. I'm good. I've been very busy.
Okay, there you go.
And you have been very busy this week.
Yes, yes. You're the rose amongst the thorns now.
Oh, the thorn among the roses.
Oh, I think you're more of a rose. Okay. But in any case, I leave it to you. The floor is yours. Take care and good luck. Enjoy yourselves, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nazri.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. So are we ready to go?
Yes, Prof, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear everyone. Okay. So I'll start the session. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me first thank MyFinB for organizing and the organizing team for an amazing 5 days of engagement on AI on various aspects. And this track is on education. I believe a very important component of AI outreach to enhance personalized learning. And I think the house rules have been laid out before. So let me remind you to mute your mics if you're not speaking, and please post your questions in the Q&A section. And for this track, we have 4 exemplary panel of speakers, and I believe they have been introduced earlier. And we will start with having each panel member or speaker speak for 10 minutes on their passion for this topic and their sharing on AI in education. And after the 10 minutes, I will then have some questions which I'll pose to the panel members. And then we'll open to Q&A. So if that is okay, let me start with the first speaker. I will just go in the order of the way their photographs are lined in this poster. First, I'll call on Professor Dato Polchan to share with us his perspectives. And Dato, all yours.
Thanks, Prof, and good afternoon to all present. We all agree how devastating this COVID has been to all of us. So many dreams have been shattered. But at the same time, we notice that there are bold visionaries emerging. So how do I see the context of the pandemic for education? First of all, I don't think that we are in the new normal. I would say that we are in the abnormally new. We are in a change of era, not an era of change. So that's the way I understand my context and the way I would like to manage, help university and collaborate with other institutions. So how do we look at the role of AI and digitalization in the broader sense? I want to contextualize this in terms of my mission and that of my university, and that is to help people succeed in life and to live a life of significance. So how does AI address the first part of the mission, which is about capacity building, capability building? But the second part of our statement is about living a life of significance. So how does AI help us to understand our existential questions, the purpose of life itself, and how do we situate education in that big context? It's obvious that I give priority to the structure and the direction of the university organization. So the first big question that we address is how AI or digitalization can help us to build an agile organization that is appropriate in a very unpredictable situation that is due to a very chaotic environment, anxieties, and the emergence almost by the week of uncommon parameters. So there's a type of environment that we have to survive, and if we are entrepreneurial, to thrive in. So obviously, I must try to find out how AI can reduce uncertainty in our decision making. So we have set up a transformation task force. We call it the 4R transformation. R refers to how we reframe our vision and our performance measurement. The second R is about how we revitalize our business model. And the third R is how to restructure our governance, the institutional, digital, and physical infrastructure. And the last R is about how to renew our talent pool. And so, how would AI enable us to do this transformation? But this is very experimental, experiential, exploratory, because we have to learn how AI can assist us. And to do that, we have to master somewhat different levels of AI technology. But definitely AI can assist us in at least 4 important areas, which are very critical. How does AI assist us to make good, reliable, entrepreneurial decisions, particularly in scenario analysis, risk management in investment, competitor and customer evaluation? The second one is how to develop our personal leadership and amplify it to the organizational and at the alliance level, that is leadership at the platform strategy level. And obviously, the third area would be about management, how AI can assist us to manage quality and standards, resources, systems, processes, and so on. But to do that, we must use AI to construct the necessary KPIs more accurately. So in this way, we hope that the use of such technology can enable us to introduce innovative products, services, innovative processes, and of course, innovative business models. The second issue that we want to address is how AI at different levels of smartness can help us to deliver more efficiently all aspects of teaching and learning pedagogy with the right type of graduate outcomes. Now, there's a lot of literature in this, and I'm not going to dwell on all the details. And I'm also mindful that some of the speakers after me will elaborate on them. So it's not fair for me to preempt all the issues in our discussion. So, but I would like to highlight a few, and in particular, this would be about the student-teacher relationship. Now, first of all, we have to understand AI has different levels of sophistication. I mean, the lowest level is to do routine tasks. That's ordinary, shall we say, weak AI, as in automation. Then you may have some human assisted intelligence, making decisions, taking some actions, and so on. Then the third level will be augmented intelligence, and this means human decision making automation. But obviously, when the AI has reached a higher level, shall we say, super intelligence, then you have autonomous intelligence, and that will be quite different. But this is still in the process of being designed. So how do we look at all these different levels of AI smartness to help us do a better job as an educator? I think the first difficult challenge is how to integrate, how to infuse, and how to immerse AI into the education setting. And this is not a technological issue per se. Actually, it's a sociological problem, and at times is almost metaphysical. But it is important that we understand that the teachers who are good teachers are not necessarily fluent in the use of technology. Unfortunately, at this moment, there are not enough trained teachers who can comprehensively grasp the technology of AI and at the same time integrate them into the new setting. The reason is the various capabilities and competencies of teachers have to be interpreted in context. It's an ongoing dialogical conversation, series of cycles of inquiries between the teacher, the student, and technology, and even nature. It's a complex nexus. It's not just introducing a gadget and therefore a student will learn to love the Shakespearean love sonnets or E.E. Cummings' I wear your heart with me, and so on and so on. So some aspects of AI can excel to enable teachers to train students in certain skills, but the emotive part, the empathy part, to feel what we learn is somewhat different. In fact, I wonder whether AI would deform some of the learning processes. Two of the great things that involve creativity in a human being are when we were a baby, we learned to walk. When we try to learn to talk, that is another fantastic creativity. If AI can displace, for instance, a child's learning process, that particular unique experience of learning how to speak, then the evolution of a human being, the evolution of the learning process in a human being is very different already. In fact, if that happens, then many cultures, in particular languages, would be destroyed because there's no incentive, there's no need for me to learn a language. I just use a gadget, I speak in my native tongue or in English in particular, then you'll be translated. So there is no need for me to learn how to go through the difficult process using my brain and the neural processes to understand a Chinese character and to pronounce it 5 tones, 4 tones, 7 tones. This is Cantonese, a pictorial word, and this ends up at some point into calligraphy. That's the beauty of it. So that will be gone one day. So AI has this greatness, but at the same time, it also introduces some darkness in our uncertain future. So, how does AI in education and in the education of a human being enable us to make moral and ethical judgments? The hype at the moment is all about the technology, about functionalities, about efficiencies. But there's a bigger purpose that AI may not be able to contribute in the existence of an individual and mankind at large. So, how much is AI optional? How much is AI obligatory? And where are the areas the AI should be forbidden to intervene and invade in our spiritual, intellectual, social, and economic life? These are the bigger philosophical issues. Education is meant to liberate, to emancipate, and therefore humanoids, whatever they are called, should not dictate how we live. They are just tools. Otherwise, we forget the very purpose of our existence. So sometimes we give too much emphasis to the functional and efficiency part of this type of tools in our education. I doubt that AI can enable every human being to be creative, empathetic, and compassionate. If all the routine tasks are taken away, and this is going to happen, everyone says human beings therefore can do all the creative activities and endeavors. But what are creative activities? For an every human being, not knowing how to do various ordinary things is part of his creative development, just like a child learning a language, learning how to walk. And that should not be taken away from a human being. But this is going to happen, and if AI is to enable all of us, mankind, to live a longer life, to 90 or 100 and so on, because healthcare is going to improve, then what do we do with the rest of our lives? Doing creative work? What is creative work at the age of 90? No, everyone is going to be a scientist, a writer, and so on. We still live our ordinary life. So with that type of extended life and so much leisure, what do we do? So it comes back to a very important question. How do we coexist with the evolution of AI, which is not going to end, but an individual life has a finite time, and society at large, mankind, unless there's a nuclear war, will continue to exist. But because of AI, well, the population may end up to be 20 billion. What is the limit? Because AI is going to enable us to live longer, and it's going to solve most of our health problems, diseases, etc., etc. So, in conclusion, I say that AI definitely helps us to improve the way we teach and learn in so many ways. It's going to cut the cost of management, improve our predictability in decision making, and so on. But there's still one fundamental question. How does it help us to feel and live our life more purposefully and with significance? The central role of human beings should not and should not be allowed to be displaced by humanoids. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato' Paul, for your bringing us down to ground and bringing into reminding us about purposeful life and the role of education. And you also mentioned about the agile organization and capacity and capability building. A lot of challenges. A lot of interesting questions you have raised for us to think about. I think some of the questions you raised, maybe MyFinB team can think about it. And if there are any solutions from our AI practitioners, this will be good time to post for us as well. So let me call upon the next speaker. We have Brad. Let me invite Brad Cunningham to share his insights on AI and in relation to education. All yours, Brad.
Thanks very much. And from my perspective, hearing all that wonderful philosophy, my positioning is more around the commercial side, being an accountant by trade. I'm going to focus a bit on the commercial aspects, and I guess that juxtaposes quite significantly against what we've just heard. And I wanted to start by sharing some of the insights in Australia around COVID and the corporate education market, more of the professional side. And that's the space that I work in mainly, is the corporate education and the corporate governance side. And then I just want to have a touch on the engagement side of things, and then actual commercialization. So I'll just put that together quite quickly. So starting with some of the challenges in Australia, and I don't think the challenges in Australia are too different to elsewhere in the world in terms of education. We've seen a lot of businesses pivot very quickly from the face-to-face market and running events and education programs within buildings and around tables to online like we are today. We've seen lots of organisations do that. And interestingly, I've seen quite a few successful businesses within Australia do this rapidly by moving straight to Zoom and Teams, which, you know, we just heard about what's the new normal, and yet that has become a new normal for now. But the question is, where is that heading and where are we going to end up with that? And I'll come back to that because that's a really important question when you come back to engagement and satisfaction, particularly from a commercial point of view. But the interesting thing is that a lot of businesses have pivoted very well. And I think the customers have and students have picked up the online experience very quickly. Having said that, I think there is still a large demand for human interaction, particularly that online presence. We're using Skype and Teams and all those methods rather than just an online platform. So my business has developed an online platform, and I guess if you look at engagement from two ends of the spectrum, you have pure online and then you have the face-to-face. And at the moment, what we're seeing is a mixed delivery of online and face-to-face. So one of the questions is, what is that new normal going to end up like? And I think touching on some of the philosophical aspects of what we just heard, potentially, particularly in the social science area and the area of corporate governance, I don't think that we're ever going to see something that's just totally online. I mean, of course, there's room for that, but you know, commercially and what people actually want and the engagement and satisfaction from learning comes from that social interaction, particularly around corporate governance. And I think this is a very good example because of that, the social science of corporate governance. And let's face it, a lot of corporate governance is around behaviours rather than compliance. So face-to-face is a really important aspect of that. So if we look at the model for totally online versus the face-to-face, one of the interesting aspects of that is cost. Of course, the online aspect is a low-cost model, whereas the face-to-face model is quite an expensive model. once you factor in facilitation fees, room costs, food and beverage costs, all those aspects, you do find that the face-to-face is an expensive alternative. Having said that, it also has one of the highest engagement and satisfaction rates. Now, this is particularly important in the corporate education space. All our metrics sit around engagement and satisfaction. And just remember, engagement can be positive and negative and still end up with a positive satisfaction rating, as long as people are engaged and contributing during an education process. So I'll just leave you with that thought around the online versus the face-to-face, and we'll come back to that, that later on. But that is a key aspect for us in terms of what the new normal is going to look like and what is the opportunity in terms of what AI can provide in the future. Just based off the particular aspects that come out of facilitated sessions, it's the ability to be able to read the room and adjust the program. It's about adjusting and engaging to individuals that aren't perhaps as engaged as what they should be. And it's also about creating rapport with the facilitator of the program so that the attendees become advocates. So if we take those three key aspects, from my perspective in the commercial space, what I see is that there's a huge opportunity for AI to not replicate those aspects, because that would be sort of impossible to a certain extent. But what I believe is that they're the challenges of what AI needs to achieve in our education space. Individualizing the learning creates the engagement and better learning outcomes. So we've heard about individualization, I think, throughout the last 4 days and how important that is. But I don't think you can talk about individualization without talking about engagement and satisfaction. I think they're two key metrics that we need to include when we're looking at that. Now, looking at the commercialization side of things, and I'll just touch on this and I'll come back to it later. One of the key components is mass marketing, or mass marketing of education. And we've seen with the introduction of MOOCs in the past that there's a lot of cut through and a lot of interest in people attending those courses. But if we come back to the engagement, what we do see is that people on the whole do not complete those courses. So I believe there's still, let's call it a 5% completion rate. So that's the challenge, is to get people engaged to complete the courses. So if you're going to commercialize a product, you need to make sure that people finish it and are engaged and have a good experience and are satisfied. So an online experience provides a low cost model. And that's something I'll touch on again later, because that's something our business is very focused on, is developing low cost, high quality education experiences that can be mass marketed to people. I believe that's the future of education. I believe that's what MOOCs are still trying to do. It's been a few years now, but I don't think they've quite cracked the code. But I believe the success we're having in Australia in terms of having a low cost, high volume model, predominantly online, keeping the costs down, is something that with the use of AI, we can take that even further. And with low cost, we can touch on a lot more people, and particularly with corporate governance being my passion, we can make corporate governance more accessible to a lot more people and make a bigger impact on society. So I'll just leave you with that, and hopefully we can come back to a little bit more depth on some of those key aspects later on.
Thank you very much, Brad, for that sharing and giving us a bit of positive outlook on how corporate governance can leverage on AI, which is also an area of passion for me as well. So basically, you talked about AI possibility, potential for enhancing student engagement, and also the social interaction around using AI. And I look forward to more engagement on this later, and maybe our next speakers can also elaborate on this. So let me call upon David Leong to share with us on his take on how AI can come in and enhance education. David?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Pro, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, my name is David. I have a slides to share about this talk. Let me give me a moment just to share my slides. Mm. Okay, here it goes. All right. So the title of my sharing is harnessing the power of AI for education. So as an educator, I will, and also as a practitioner for AI, I will share about these some of these challenges that we face and how and these are some of these tools that we have developed to help along in the education using AI. Right. AI is here. Certainly, I think most of you know that it's very in a very humble form. It's not like a cyborg that's walking on the street, but they're actually working as they're incorporating the software and work at the background. And these days, I think probably if you're in Singapore, you will be seeing all these autonomous vehicle testing around in some of these selected areas in Singapore, especially in the western regions. And also, we have autonomous bus that ferrying students in the National University of Singapore from one location to another. And AI also used extensively in other industries like banking and finance, in trading stocks, and also in healthcare, in help in medical, in help in the medical imaging and also diagnostics. And in terms of personal securities, they have facial recognition software that is on the smartphone and also mobile phones, okay, to help in their authentication so that you guys can access to your own phone and all the sensitive data. Right. So yeah, AI could move Singapore economy ahead in half the time. So certainly, because it's very helpful in terms of improving productivities. So there are AI been implemented in the manufacturing sectors, in healthcare services, in transportations. Right, and these days you could purchase new cars that allow AI built into it to help in the navigations and also voice recognitions to better control radios and also some of these gadgets in the car. Right, used extensively in financial services, hospitality, and retail. So these are the common AI use cases that can find in the internet or in also most of the textbook, like in data security, how you can actually filter out the spam emails, in personal security, financial trading, automated contents, and also automating summarizing the text and a long passage of text, and also to generate fake news, and also used in excessively in search engine and also in fraud detections. Okay, but where exactly can education be fit into these use cases? All right, so education is actually, in terms of AI in education, is seldom mentioned in most of the literature, except those that are in the teaching lines and also in supports the education institutions. Right, so the fear factor is, according to statistics, 87% of the educator in UK are worried about the potential of AI. Why is it so? Because they may think that there is a negative impacts on learning and social skills in the classroom. Right, with 80% of the educators consider leaving the profession, right, due to unbearable workload, right, currently because of a shortage of teachers and so on, right. So using AI technology can free up these hours, okay, these times to spend on the routine administrative tasks so that they can teach more. So instead of fearing for AI, it can augment teaching by providing the educator with data insights. It can also certainly be used to improve the education received by children in all walks of life. Right. Next, we talk about the accuracy of the content delivered in the current education scenario. Right. So the traditional education system is usually catered for learners with average cognitive ability. Therefore, it cannot serve learners sufficiently. So traditional curriculums are designed to suit many learners to suit as many learners as possible by targeting around 80% in the middle. So therefore, top 10% of the learner will find the regular learning paces is too lengthy and slow, and the bottom 10% face difficulty in following the lessons revealed by instructor. right? So how can we leverage on the AI? So we need to forge a new partnership with AI. So AI can drive efficiency, personalizations, and streamline admin tasks, right? Allowing the educator more times and freedoms to provide understandings and adaptabilities to learners' needs. And as educational solutions continue to mature, AI fill the gaps in teaching and learning, allowing schools and educators to do more for the learners. So the vision of AI in education is one that where we can work collaboratively together for the best outcome of learners. So I touch on two of the common use cases for AI in education. One of them is the personalized learning. Okay, so what is a personalized learning? Okay, AI can do is in this area is to provide personalized learning. It is able to adjust learning based on the learner's particular needs. This can be a priority for education for many years. So several companies like the content technologies and also the Cunningham learnings, both companies are in the States. They're currently developing digital platforms with intelligent instruction design. They use AI to provide learning, testing, and feedback to learners from preschool level all the way to college. So these platforms can identify learning gaps that could redirect students to new topics in order to bridge the knowledge. So using computer visions, it's possible for machines to read the expressions of the learner's face online, okay, and that shows the confusions in the understanding the subjects, and it can actually modify the lessons dynamically to respond to these sort of reactions, okay. So these ideas of customizing a curriculum for every student's needs is still not variable today, okay, but AI powered machines can translate this idea into reality in the very near futures. Another use case, right, for the AI is tutoring and support of students outside classroom. So because of the COVID-19 situations, most of the classes are conducted at home. Okay, so we call it the home-based learning. So parents are excited about the potentials of AI to support their children when they are doing online lessons and are struggling with the learning at home. So with the advances in the natural language processing, AI tutors are becoming more intelligent. In the way soon, more AI applications will be available to respond to a range of subjects and learning style. The current education sectors might be a little slow in adopting AI and machine learning, okay, but the changes have begun and will continue to do so in an accelerated rate. Other types of AI applications in education are as follows: smart contents. Okay, so these are technologies that attempts to condense the textbook into useful assessment tools for learners, so that they can prepare for their examinations. So it can be a form of multiple choice questions, true and false questions to quiz the learners in their understanding. Another application will be intelligent tutoring systems. This is a form of personalized electronic tutoring that customized to learning styles and preference of the learners. And last of all, we have the virtual facilitators. Okay, this is a guide to guide students in the learning in various kind of education and environment, including indoor and outdoor. Right, what I'm going to show over here, these are the different types of AI education systems that are currently being developed, and some of them are still under the R&D phase, right? So they support they support actually four of these umbrella under students teaching, okay, under the student supports, under the teacher supports, and last of all is the system supports, whereby you require AI as assistive tools, okay, to help for students that belongs to the special education needs. So what I want to introduce you is two of these edutech projects that are currently engaging by our staff and in Republic Polytechnic, right? So one of them is we call it the AI Learning Companion. So my colleagues actually built the chatbot. Okay, so my colleague built the my colleague actually built the chatbots that assist students in Python and Java programming modules. So how does it work? Okay, we let the chatbot respond to queries. However, not all the questions are be answered because they're not trained, because we can't factor in a lot of questions from the students, and I don't know what kind of questions they will ask pertaining to the syntax of programming and or the logics. right? So any unanswered queries will be routed to all the participants as well as the Stack Overflow. So this Stack Overflow is actually a web resources for computer programmers. So any participant with a valid response can answer to the chatbot, and module managers, okay, will approve the most appropriate answer. Once this is approved, the student will receive the answers, okay, through the messengers, and the chatbot itself will also automatically learn the answers and become better in responding to the student every time, okay, when there is a query, right? And the second project we want to introduce is actually the AI-based auto-generating questions framework for the online tutoring. This is still under the proposals, but we will soon start up the development on this in this area. Okay, these are frameworks that auto-generate assessment questions on the selected topics and provide feedbacks on the learner's performance. Okay, so we have a web applications as a graphical user interface at the front end, and also the AI power back end. Okay, so the back end incorporates a combination of the natural language processing and also in genetic algorithm to generate assessment questions. So teachers are to provide the learning material such as files or URLs that are related to the topics or the subjects as input. Upon assessed by the students, it will generate a list of concepts and topics available for the student to choose. And it also produces a number of questions with varying difficulty levels depending on the chosen topic. So in each of these questions answered by the students, it will generate feedback on his or her performance. And based on the quality of the correctness of the answer, it can vary the difficulty level of subsequent questions so that it can keep getting more and more difficult, okay, to quiz and to stretch the understandings and also to quiz how good they are in the certain subjects. So in conclusions, as AI advances in education domain, there is more evidence to support the ideas that both AI and educator are needed to manage different aspects of the learner academic and social competency. AI will likely not replace teacher, okay, but it will serve as an invariable extension of a human expert, assisting the educator to meet the diverse needs of many learners simultaneously. Right, that's all I have for the sharing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, David. And I think your note is very positive and encouraging. It gives us good news to educators that we can draw on AI to enhance the personalized learning of our students. I think there's still a long way to go in terms of the capacity building and capability building, as mentioned by Dr. Paul. But
Yes.
you're saying that it's possible, and you have projects on that. So let's hear from. I'll move to the next speaker and our last speaker, who is our youngest member of the panel, Arif Ahmad, who is also an alumni of Sunway University. So I'm glad to invite Arif to share his passion about AI in education.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, everyone, for sharing these philosophical needs of education, these commercialization needs of education, and most importantly, how do we harness AI power? It is so much valuable into moving forward with this. I just want to take a bit of time to share my screen. So if you could give me 1 minute as I share my screen, it'll be right here. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So there's one very big similarity, technical similarity between my father and me, which is the amount of time that technology advanced within his time, about 60 years, has been very similar or very much the same for me as well. So what happened there? The exponential growth of technology and how it impacted humans' life and how it integrated to part of being who we are has been phenomenal. And that is the reason why we're talking about education of humans and machines, not just human itself. That is AI learning, that is artificial intelligence. But I want to touch on this. What if there was no education? What would have happened to us? Will we remain human? So the fourth stage isn't about technologies. and how amazing machines can be. It is about exploring the definition of what makes us human and how intellectually curious we are. So what have we done in the past? We are exceptionally good in outsourcing and enhancing functions of our life in physical and mental part of it. We have used fire to help with digestion and safety, developed language to explore thinking and connecting with the others in the form of stories, built agriculture and cities for trading strengths and dividing labor, innovated mechanics to increase efficiency of work, and invented writing for knowledge to live outside of a human mind. But we didn't stop there. We're in the progress of developing intelligence that can be programmed to solve virtually any problems. This is the new era where we're trying to outsource thinking and learning outside of human mind and focus on imagining, because only humans can imagine, a better use of our time and energy. So I have a question for all of you. How would you use your time if you had abundant resources and unlimited opportunities? Something to think about. And if you do have some of your thoughts, please write down in the chat box. We would definitely address those. So moving forward, what do we notice? At each of this transition of using a better tool, we have educated ourselves and transferred our knowledge to many. Education here is considered as an enlightened experience, where there is a focus shift of education becoming personalized for the receiver instead of following a standard template. This personalized education focuses on the receiver and their needs, and it will help nurture their thinking and ideas that may not fit into a standard system, and that's fine. But education hasn't been ideal. The productivity mindset that we are pressured for, has forced education to focus more on competence than character, which increased a gap between literacy and morals, unfortunately creating many average learners. We are now living the catastrophic outcome of this, where we disturbed Mother Nature's balance so much to fit our productivity needs that caused issues like global warming, COVID disease, and more. But the battle is not lost. We have amazing human power, and light education can create the balance and bring out the best of human and its supported systems. Please note that its supported systems are machines, animals, and nature, not the primary. The primary still is considered human. To do this, light education needs to solve some key educational challenges. So what are those? In the 19th century, it took almost 80% of the US population to produce the country's food. Now it is about 2%. Yet global hunger remains, even though humans and nature have the ability to produce enough food for all. Interestingly, the majority of the world's hungry lives in countries who are also exporters of food. So why can't they feed their population? The answer is poverty, where people are too poor to buy their food. Poverty is further influenced by disease, where we have been plagued with the unknown, and the economic surrounding of cure has always favored the wealthy. All of these developments require energy, where we are far away from our goal of increasing, not decreasing or managing, increasing our energy consumption in a clean, sustainable, and just way. This inequality is causing nations to go on war for loot. Now, it's a blessing that it is becoming less profitable now, and it's continuing to be so, as cost of development is exponentially higher than cost of destruction. So where does this all fall into? All of this are causing a fundamental challenge. We are keeping humans' precious time unnecessarily occupied, where we would rather explore opportunity with an abundant mindset. We want to express ourselves, learn from each other, help causes, apply our imagination, make an impact, and know the truth. AI can help here. So my question to all of you, another question, how does your work and passion contribute to the solution of these problems? Something to think about, and if you have something to write down in chat, please do so, because we're going to address them later. So what is this artificial intelligence? There is a common perception that AI is this conscious being that can imitate life, but we are far, far away from such advancements. A better definition of AI is a technology that reacts to data and learns from its environment to solve a very, very specific kind of problem. This is known as narrow AI. And we have examples like Google Assistant, Siri for Apple, vacuum cleaner, and even rice cooker, if you didn't know that. So how does narrow AI work? There are 3 ways. Let's take farming as an example. So let's say you want to make an AI that tells farmers when to plant their seeds. So there's 3 ways, right? The first way is the classic way, where it thinks through all the factors like soil, crop, and rainfall, and then build a suggestion model. The expert way is to gather all expert farmers, write down all methods that work best for them, and make a suggestion based on the environment. But the one we'll focus on here is the learning way, that takes all relevant data, knows the outcomes of using those data, and then makes a recommendation. The issue with this method is you can't ask a computer why it made the suggestion. That's where human comes in. Machines learn through memories, where they accumulate data from everywhere and use curated algorithms to develop insights and actions. But humans doesn't learn in the same way. Humans learn through behavior, where they physically change the structure of their brain by absorbing information from the outside and forming what we call experiences. There's a beautifully said quote by Maya Angelou, a famous American poet. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. These feelings are experiences that causes us to understand the whys of an event and allows us to make better decisions. Again, AI gives us insights, but we are the one who makes actions of those insights. Hence the decision coming in. Another important part of learning is receiving validations of actions that allows us to understand what is working well and what isn't. These feedback mechanisms aren't used for testing on how much we remember. It's not about memory. It's about where we are at the moment, understanding our current state, and our readiness to learn more. Are we okay? Are we there to learn more about something or something else? Now, this creates a contrasting difference between transfer of knowledge for humans and for machines. As we discussed earlier, machines can be taught by providing enough information about a topic, and with a powerful computer, it can calculate personalized predictions. But humans require interaction with the reality of those data. The more a person interacts with the world, the more they understand the experiences formed within them. That's intrinsic. External information coming in to make intrinsic changes in our mind. This is where engagement, as Brad just talked about, in learning is key, where we create a narrative of the information, much like a movie, and understand the context and relevance of the information, and furthermore, validate our learnings by doing. If we don't do it, we can live on theories, but the moment we do it, our theories may change, and it does. So I want to ask yourself another question. What will you remember better? 1 minute clip of 100 movies, so that's 100 clips of 1 minute each, which focuses on your memory, or would you remember a 100-minute movie, like a Netflix series? Something to think about. AI is a fundamentally different being that can help humans to do what they do best and allows us to explore on what we can do better. And in the process of understanding ourselves, we become more kinder to others, making us more humane. And it's not an or, it's not an if, it's an and. AI works with and will work with humans to improve human self. But before I finish, I want us to do an imagination activity. I want all of you who is watching here, about 200 plus, and listening to this, and I also request my honorable speakers to take part in this activity as well. Could I all ask you to lift your index finger like this? Thank you. So as you put your index fingers like this, I want you to imagine me putting a single grain of sand on your finger, just a single grain, just right here. Okay. Now I want you to extend your fingers towards this beautifully starry night. Let's imagine that. We have that picture here. I want you to put it right up there. Can you spot the grain? Let's use a chat box a little bit. If you say yes or no, let's hear few from here. If you can chat. Okay, so let's imagine this. So you're imagining that I've put a sand of grain on here, and you can spot the sand grain. If your focus just went to spot the sand grain, then it is blocking your view towards the thousands of galaxies that is just behind it. It is time for us to think big and think deep. Thank you so much. Over to you, Professor.
Oh, thank you so much, Arif, for that sharing. And yeah, you posed a lot of interesting questions, and I hope our audience have taken it on board and they're thinking about it. Yeah, I'm particularly very intrigued about the optimism you show and the evolution of technology and the humankind. And also you raised the question about dark side of education, light education. These are all new concepts to me, and I'm really learning this. And I think I share your optimism in that we should be using AI for the better good, as Dato mentioned, the purposeful life. And Dato did raise earlier on, what do we do if we have all this free time? Yeah, I think I can think of a lot of things I would like to do if I were to be free of that. Focusing on the nitty-gritty of education, we could look at so much more. And as you said, the bigger goals, bigger picture, and yeah, really basically eradicating poverty and making society, you know, a better place for everyone. I think with that, let me just pose some questions to, we have some questions coming up, but we will address them later. I've got some questions which I want to take through with the panel of speakers. To Dato Paul, you did raise quite a number of views on the education, AI in education. Based on your experience, on your personal experiences from Help University, do you believe the AI will change the business model of private higher education as well as the public higher education in Malaysia? For example, as you are helming one of the private higher education.
I think, yes, yeah, Prof. AI is so invasive. It has entered into every fabric of our social, economic, and education configuration, shall we say. The AI is very destructive in one way, and that is it has blurred the boundaries of industries. So it is therefore very difficult to define a particular industry that is somewhat isolated from the rest. In fact, it's impossible. So you have a configuration of a mess of supply chains and value chains, producing, distributing, consuming, and so on. And education, therefore, is in this way being disrupted and is therefore part of a bigger ecology. It is developing its own ecology, maybe not as strong as, let's say, in the medical health care system and so on, but definitely is emerging to develop is global standards, qualities, assessments, etc., etc. But the important thing is education is now a derived demand, meaning education will never, the sun will never set on the education industry. It's going to grow and expand. And the reason is because it is very broad and comprehensive. Being a derived demand means that whatever happens in any sphere of life, in particular, in the way companies are managed and the way the workforce is developed, how work is redefined, and the development of the workplace, for instance. All this will drive the demand for education and training. And therefore, the university and such formal institutions that used to be the conventional providers of education and training will have to adjust itself to the needs of the industries, except for some very strongly professionally controlled education like medicine and so on, engineering. But for the others, anybody, any big corporation, multinational company can enter into the education and training sector. So the entry into the education sector is somewhat low, although it's highly regulated. Second, there are lots of substitutes. There are so many ways to get educated. The cumulative learning is very different now, by bikes, 24/7, and access is very easy. And because there are so many providers with so many alternatives, therefore you can learn by bikes, And now the workplace and many corporations will not even demand a person to have a degree. For example, if you want to do a Bachelor of Business in Marketing, probably the most important foundational skills, example, digital literacy, and so on, would be sufficient because the company, the employer would provide you the hands-on learning, which may be more relevant and in real time. So this blurring of the education providers, the education sector, means that the impact of AI would accelerate the process of change. And therefore, universities have to redefine themselves. The traditional role of research, teaching, and so on will still be there, but it will be very different already. I mean, some of the speakers have already emphasized how AI is reconfiguring differentiated learning, personalized learning, and so on and so on. AI will definitely globalize us. So all of us are globalized, whether we like it or not, because the moment you go virtual, you are competing with the best in the world. You cannot say you're a Malaysian player or a Singapore player. You are a globalized player. And therefore, AI is disruptive in this way, and it is definitely going to separate the chef from the wheat. I mean, we really have to be good. So how do we make use of AI, therefore, to expand, to grow in a particular way, but more importantly, to differentiate, not just diversify, to differentiate, meaning what is strategy? Strategy is basically sustained differentiation. So how to expand, differentiate, and how to internationalize, because there are 7 billion people in this world. So the market is still there, and the population is still growing, and the age differentials for different countries also need different types of training needs. Senior citizens need particular type of trained people to help them. Young people need early childhood education, and so on and so on. So innovate EDI. Otherwise, as I always say, it will be DIE, DIE. So it is in that context that AI provides fantastic opportunities and the catalyst for us to move faster. But unfortunately, education is like growing a garden of trees and fruit trees, or a plantation of all palm trees and rubber. It takes time for us to do certain things. And the regulatory regime does not facilitate us to move fast. So the moment you are locked into a particular niche in the value chain or supply chain, you're stuck for years. You don't just introduce a degree and say, nobody wants it, so therefore I stop it. You already have an inventory of human beings and talents, all the infrastructure, all the syllabi, all the promotional. All these things are fixed costs, you see. And if you are good, there will be new emerging competitors moving in very fast. So the equilibrium is reached very fast. However hard you try to differentiate, it is equalized very fast. So that means the model, whether it's a public university or private university, is not an easy model. And hence, I think there will be continual disruption as opportunities arise. And it is up to founders, CEOs, and the team of players, not just the academics, the people who may be more entrepreneurial to see the future, to devise different ways of learning and education. And of course, the buyers, shall we say the customers, that means the parents, teachers, and so on, must recognize that the world has changed. To me, my customer is not the student. If I were to use the word customer, I have to address the needs of the industry and the employers. If employers do not want my students, my graduates, then there is no demand for whatever I do. But therefore, the traditional role of the university as a source of wisdom beyond knowledge will be somewhat compromised. Because if we are struggling to always think of a better business model, then we have no time to reflect on the bigger roles, especially the ethical and moral responsibilities of a university, especially in this very difficult and turbulent world of violence and then racism, hatred, and so on. Universities ought to play this role as we try to look after our cash flow and so on. And this is where the dilemma is difficult to resolve. As the AI creates opportunities, many of us are really reminding ourselves that this will definitely accelerate income, wealth, and power inequality. So if you look at it from the viewpoint of moral justice and so on, AI has nothing to do with equity and inequity, is neutral. It's going to continue to impoverish the marginalized, the people with disabilities and so on. If we want to take education seriously, then there has to be a collective effort. And the governments, founders of private institutions and colleges, public universities, NGOs, and so on, should come together, especially at this difficult moment, to look at some of these challenging issues, such that the youth, which is and who is going to inherit our future, will not be destroyed in the process. I understand that amongst the youth population between 15 to 18 or thereabout, there are at least 400 million of such marginalized or disadvantaged people. So AI may make this disenfranchisement worse rather than better. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, for that very holistic view and a passionate sharing from a founder of a university. I hope many private universities and public universities will take the challenge and engage with the government to look at how we can address some of these issues and leverage on AI. May I now move to Brad? Brad, maybe some of the questions that are also coming up on the Q&A section. We have got 9 questions there. Would you like to address any of these questions also? But in the context, I also would like to find out from your governance work, do you believe that AI can actually has the potential to make society more accountable through education?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Kind of following on from Dr. Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a great question, because if we believe that governance is put in place to keep our leaders and organisations accountable, and if we believe education's there to improve the outcomes of society, if we put those two together, then AI underpinning that can help in the distribution of governance education. Now, if we go back to I guess some definitional pieces around governance, then we're looking at governance 3.0, and we're not just talking about risk, strategy, and finance, more compliancy sort of base bits. They're the bits that really could, in terms of corporate governance, if there's methodology, I've seen methodologies at the moment working in that space, in the AI space, to take away those compliance aspects and lift directors and governance professionals into more of the decision-making space. So trying to step above those and move more into, I guess, the social aspects. And that's why I call governance 3.0. So we're talking about purpose, making sure what our organizations are doing are linked to our purpose, making sure that we've got good oversight of the culture of our organizations, and also making sure we're aware of our key stakeholders in the greater society. And again, just because we can doesn't mean that we should in terms of society. We need to keep our organizations and our leaders accountable in terms of the balance between profits and other outcomes. So it's my belief, and I guess it's my great hope in what we're trying to do. We're trying to make governance as accessible as we can. I think it's my hope that AI can underpin that and help disseminate those thinkings and methodologies to improve the world that we live in. I know that's very altruistic, but it needs to happen, because if we look at, and I've done some numbers around governance education, particularly in Australia, and if we look at the governance professionals in Australia, there's millions of company directors and there's millions of senior executives in companies. Now, we did some numbers in terms of, if we call governance professionals in boards with over 5 people on boards, And then we look at the number of people that are educated in that space with some kind of formal education. We're only looking at about 10 to 15% of that market that has any kind of formal governance education. So the opportunity is massive, and we're not just talking about, you know, a couple of 100,000 people. We're talking about, you know, and we're not just talking about public listed companies as well. We're talking about, you know, government-run organisations, not-for-profit organisations, the whole spectrum across our whole society. So once we look at that, and there's only 10 or 15% of those educated in corporate governance, there's a massive opportunity for us to have a low cost, as I talked about before from a commercial point of view, a low cost model, high quality, driven right across society to help better our world that we live in. Now, if we look at the potential for that, it's like I say, we're already moving in that space. COVID, that's where COVID's helped us, because we're transitioning from, particularly in Australia, we've been really set in our ways on face-to-face. And what we're seeing now is that we have moved, we're transitioned to at least doing video, which is fantastic. So we're moving in the right direction. Where is it going to stop? Well, hopefully we're going to come up with some kind of mixed delivery model, particularly in the governance space. I've mentioned AI helping out in risk and strategy and finance, but where we could end up is a mixed delivery model where we're using AI to solve those issues. In education, it's helping us drive those compliance sort of areas and helping us with those, leaving us with a mixed delivery model where we're talking and discussing the social aspects of organizations and boards and governance issues. Because at the heart and soul, and I mentioned this before, a lot of board issues are behavioral. We can't forget the social aspect of that. And it's hard to believe that as humans, we would transition 100% to something that's fully computerized. We are humans, there's human nature, there's decision making. So there is a place for a mixed delivery model in this. So that's my vision for corporate governance. Part of that, we can't wait for AI to help that. So part of what we're doing is we've already partnered with the Malaysian Alliance of Corporate Directors, and we're looking at moving that low-cost model out into Malaysia to, because of the success we've had in Australia, to see what we can do in other jurisdictions. So that'll be a test case for us to see, you know, what the uptake is and what impact we can make more broadly.
Thank you, Brad. Maybe I can go to the next speaker, David. David, maybe I can raise some of the questions that have been raised because we're running out of time.
Sure.
So, you know, your passion about lifelong learning and how can we harness the potential of AI. And there's a question here which is asking, which is the causes higher, lack of education or lack of AI in education? That's possibly something you can address too. And also, which is the AI technology? There are many AI technologies or ideas being proposed. Which one should be the focus? Maybe if you can take these two questions as well as talk about your lifelong learning.
Okay, let's talk about the lifelong learning. So earlier on, I have presented some of these AI application on my slides that could help in the education, especially in the Singapore scenario. Right, the polytechnics in Singapore is catering for the pre-employment training, which is students that they're straight from graduated from the high school and secondary school, and we also catered for a small group, and actually is getting larger. All right, this group we call it the continuous education training. Right, they are adult learners. Right, so like all advanced economy, population in Singapore is continue to shrinking. So within the Institute of Higher Learning of in Singapore, our objective is not just to provide the 3 years of the tertiary educations to these secondary school students alone, right? But hopefully when they graduate from the polytechnic, for the next 30 to 40 years of their professional careers, they're able to come back to us again every 10 years or so for reskilling and also for upskilling. So in every phases of our life, the learning styles are different. right? As we go, every age, we probably prefer more textbook or probably more video kind of educations, all right? So the learning style also differ, right? So AI can assist, okay, us as educator to personalize this learning for them, right? So how AI can do it? It's through all the data analytics and also through the academic records that the students accumulate over the years. So we have past students that graduated and come back, and we still have the past academic records. Okay, and then through the outcome of the assessment in the class, that we hope that there will be effective tools. These effective tools is not invented yet, and hopefully in the very near future, we have a business of this development that integrated together. We have this particular tools that can help to customize our teaching methods to assist them learn better. Right at this moment, AI is still a very baby steps. All right, especially in the education scenario. All right, so what we can do is developing some of these assisting tool like chatbot or that to be able to answer some of these Q&A for students, right? Especially when they cannot contact the lecturers in the evening or probably late at night, whereby we retire early and the students would like to do their assignments over the night, right? And they can really make good use of the chatbots to query some of these programming issues that they face, and hopefully they can get right answers through this assistive tool. Right.
Thank you, David. I think I'll go to Arif. Arif, you've got a lot of questions that potentially you can answer. Also, it's about, you mentioned about machines learn what humans teach, and you mentioned about narrow education. So if you can expand on that, and also as to how we can enhance, AI can enhance this to improving society, as you mentioned earlier. And also there's a question here which you can relate to possibly on the SDG goal number 4 on quality education. Is there a link? There's a question asking, is there a direct link? Over to you, Ari.
Thank you so much, Professor. I will start from the second question.
Yeah.
Yes, 100%. I've mentioned this. Poverty, hunger, every disease, all are not technical challenges. They're educational challenges because of our mindset of doing something grand. In the process of doing something grand, there are so many obstacles that comes in because systems are made by humans. And these systems are a reflection of what we think. So if you can make our thinking or a thought pattern slightly more better, then I guess we will be able to solve much more in a much more faster rate than we are at the moment. So speaking of that, I will sort of combine these two questions and mention of what I have done and what I've learned from the past. Especially working with about 20 to 25 countries across, we have Asia Pacific, Europe, North America, and Australia as well, and also Mexico. We have learned Mexico and Spanish, the Latin countries. We have learned a few things. First of all, as Dr. Paul mentioned, the world is a global passport at the moment. Internet is a global passport. We don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to be eligible, or we don't have to be permitted to go anywhere at the moment through internet, unless if someone can just simply invite in. We don't have to go through regulations to go through that kind of to have that kind of an access. That is a good thing and a bad thing, but I'll talk about the good thing at the moment. So the good part of what that does is to relate back to what I've done. I've built, so there are two things that I'm doing. One is HR systems for corporates, for Fortune 500s, for multinationals, for international brands. So the moment I do that across these countries, I've learned a very similar pattern. The workflow that they work on is very convoluted and very complex. So and we've heard this from Pascal Bornet, I think yesterday or day before, is weak automation, weak processes automation results in weak automation itself. It's just like how we design or how we code a computer. Is if I put what we call garbage input, we'll definitely get garbage output. So the factor isn't what AI can do at the moment. The factor is what humans need at the moment. And are we able to accept what the readiness of where we are? So if we do accept that, AI's work become a lot less easier. It's easier to write 10 very critical lines of code rather than 1,000 very convoluted lines of code. So understanding from that perspective, something else happened, learning happened. So as we are trying to develop these workflows through automation, and as we're doing this, we have identified our people are not ready to accept this. So the cost of implementation increases not in development, but increases in the training of development. So we call this support cost. The support cost is actually higher than R&D. So why is that happening? Because there are 3 learning situations where we are at the moment. We either start from 0, where we have no prior knowledge of certain topic. We start from negative, where we have a very bad understanding of a certain knowledge, and then we try to understand or educate ourselves to move back to a positive notion of it. But the third one is actually the hardest thing to do, which is positive knowledge. I have certain knowledge or theories which are good, which are working for a certain topic, that sometimes it's difficult to learn more. It gives us a harder time to strip away of our thoughts, of our readiness, because I have to be more convinced whether I am willing to make that effect or willing to make that entrance or not. So this is where AI comes in. This learning part is where AI comes in. Learning AI understands where my current state is. It gives me personalized situations for me to experience and see whether I can make those changes or not. Our education system is based on expression and measurement, nothing else. We either express something through language or through visual or through art, or we measure something through numbers or through numerology or through logic. But in the brain itself, as we've done our research and we are doing the research and the research is following through, we don't remember numbers. We don't have numbers in our brains. We don't have 2, 3, 4. We remember language and the orientation of language. So what do I mean by that? It is very similar to abacus. So before calculator, abacus worked. And the way we understood or did calculation with abacus is that certain orientation means certain numbers. That's human brain. Certain synapses, certain neuron cells connecting to each other makes those synapses, makes those measurements happening. So we need to understand where the measurements, where those orientations are at the moment. The moment we understand the orientation, then we know, then we can provide enough time. AI can give us enough more personalized experiences to alter those, or in the sense to grow from those situations. So to help the cause with SDG number 4, I remember working with Sunway with directly Jeffrey Chia and Jeffrey Sachs for the Jeffrey Sachs community on SDG. We've covered all 17 of them. I've been there for almost 1.5 years. We call these digital AI labs or iLabs in Sunway as well. And while we were doing that, Sunway becoming an ideal SDG city, I've identified what the key missing factor was. SDG 4 should have been SDG 1 at the moment, because even hunger is a lack of education. So yes, to answer that question, education. And yes, we have so much to do with AI, but before AI, I want you to think about ourselves, because it's us who are implementing it. It's us who are experiencing it. It's us who are consequence of it, who are accountable of it, who are responsible for it. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Arif, for that sharing. I think you nailed it on its head. I think we need to look at ourselves, our systems. I think we got to turn education on its head to actually understand before we talk about bringing in AI to actually help us to achieve the bigger goals in or the purposeful life that we are talking about. With that, I think I would like to, there are a lot of questions which we are not able to take up, but I hope we can answer it to you later. We will respond to it in your in the Facebook or the link that's provided. And with that, any last words that I'll just go around and see if our speakers have got any last words to wrap up the session. I'll go back to David. I'll go in the reverse order. Arif has said his words, and I think I'll go to David. Are there any last minute
Last
words do
minute
you
thing.
want?
Yes.
Yeah. Anything you want to just one sentence?
Oh, one sentence. Yeah, AI is new, all right, and we're getting we're actually fortunate to be in a very exciting age that where AI is growing and become more intelligent, and we can work in collaboratively with the machines. Okay.
Yeah.
In my opinions, I do not agree that we should invent machines that are so intelligent that they can replace our job as an educator, right?
Yeah.
But then we can harness the power of the AIs to help us to do our work better in terms of teaching, in terms of educating the next generations of students. Yeah, though
Two more minutes. I'll go to Brad. Brad, a minute from you. A sentence. Wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring together a couple of those thoughts, and what's important, particularly what we're trying to do, is that notion that we're trying to educate people to problem solve rather than just learn some material. So it's about competency and the outcomes of what we're after. And any kind of education methodology should be moving in that direction. I believe that's come up quite a few times during the last 3 days. And I believe that any kind of AI needs to fit into that model.
Thank you, Brad. And Dr. Paul, some last words from you?
Oh, yes. Just want to share my personal experience. I started help about 36 years ago with 5,000 US.
You got a minute, Dr. Paul? We got a minute. So
okay. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
As I say, I started help 36 years ago with this conviction to satisfy 4 A's. Was education available, accessible, appropriate, and affordable to Malaysian people? So this was our conviction. So over the years, we have been guided by, besides the 4 A's, the 4 S's. Are we doing it with standards? Can we scale it up? Can we sustain it? And do all this with speed? And now with AI, can AI facilitate and enable us to do a better job and understand that we need to have a profitability model embedded, because we have our own idealism, but the profit to us is the result of quality work. Is like oxygen, blood, and water, without which we cannot survive. So our conviction remains paramount to what we do, to help people succeed in life and to live a life of significance through education. AI is to facilitate this.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. You made your convictions there, and I think we all share that. And let me just thank all my speakers on the panel for their sharing. It's been indeed very insightful for me, and I see a lot of points that we can take away. And please keep engaged with this panel of speakers, and all the best going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.